Okay, this is Bob Coppage, CEO of Simplex-IT, crotchety old geek, with another episode of BizTech Twists. Tonight's episode, unless they're listening in the middle of the day, is Chat GPT isn't a big deal yet. Why am I saying that? Well, for those of you who know me for any period of time, you know I get easily annoyed about just about anything. And one of the things that I'm finding most annoying about Chat GPT is, first of all, how many people are now freaking experts and who are going to say, this is what it's going to do, this is what it isn't going to do, all of that good fun stuff. And I get that to a certain degree. And quite honestly, we're actually creating at Simplex-IT some videos on it as well. But the thing is, it's just getting started. Now, AI has been around. I remember listening to AI talks and presentations, both on expert systems and the like, back in the 80s. And so there's nothing new from the concept of it. But here's the thing. I've been in IT since 1974 was when I first worked on my first computer. And so I've technically qualified as being old. And what that means is I've been through every single freaking revolution, and we always talk about it as if this is the be all end all. And it never is, because there's always something else. There's always something new. And that actually even predates IT. You can actually look at the first generation of steam engines and the like. And the first generation of steam engines actually did exactly the same thing that was being done manually or by animal efforts or the like. It isn't until it's been out for a while that it really gets cool and gets interesting. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the histories. When we first started using computers, and computing machines, because the first computers were, what's the tech? Oh, they were humans. And they actually were just people who were paid to do the calculations. But the first computers actually just did those calculations and worked originally on actuary tables to help insurance companies figure out what payouts should be, and also artillery tables to figure out how people should pack the explosives and set their howitzers and the like to go off. Don't ever get those mixed up, by the way, because insurance companies hate launching artillery pieces. Well, most of them do anyway. But that was essentially a non-inventive way of using a technology. So they basically looked at the work that they already had in progress and said, okay, is there a better way we can do that? And that happened throughout. When I first got involved with IT professionally, which was really in the late 70s, overwhelming majority of whether it was mainframe or mini computers, because we didn't have personal computers yet, of those applications were essentially doing the things that humans did. In other words, they did payroll, they did accounts payable, receivable, inventory, fixed assets, all that good fun stuff. And they just figured out better ways to record the data and then regurgitate the standard AR, AP, receivables, general ledgers, all those traditional reports. They didn't come up with anything new to do. They just did the same thing, but they did it with green bar paper. So we didn't have the Bob Cratchits sitting, at their chair for Scrooge or Ebenezer's whims. But that changed when we started adding additional layers of technology. And then in the 80s or the 90s, then we started coming up with PCs. And then we started adding servers. And then we started adding client servers where we had an application that would be running on a PC. That application would then connect to a server. The server would connect to the database, and yay, things would happen. But it was almost the same thing. We still had that application that was running, that application that was doing roughly the same thing, but we started adding additional capabilities or capacities to create the data on the go. I remember back in the 1980s, a friend of mine actually had a company that all they did was data entry. And I remember going to his office and visiting his office. It was horrible. He had basically this sweatshop room, and there were no cubicles. There were essentially people, about 20 or 30 people, who were just typing away at terminals, entering data manually into systems. And these systems would be entered and then dropped onto magnetic tape and then shipped overseas to companies who now had all of the data in their systems. So they were actually being given their paper records, their paper receipts, because there was no other way to record the data. Then you added all of the PCs and the like. Now suddenly the people who are actually doing the transactions could enter the data. But all they were doing was the same thing: point of sale, inventory, accounts payable, accounts receivable. They just figured out better ways to get it done. And I remember literally people would talk about how you'll never lose your job if you know how to do data entry. And there was a full-blown, this is how people make their living, by being data entry professionals. And I remember that there used to be matchbooks, and the matchbooks had "want a career in data entry, and call this number," because we didn't have the internet at that point. So as the technology matured, we would find new ways to accomplish what was roughly the same thing that was being accomplished 5-10 years earlier. Then we would create additional value by creating additional ways to use the technology or to use the information. But it would be roughly the same thing. So whenever we would talk about evolution in IT, that evolution was extremely susceptible to people thinking whatever was it revolutionary to their world. But it wasn't necessarily revolutionary to the industry. Now, of course, there were changes that actually were revolutionary. The internet, the cloud, BI, big data. All of these things are more and more searchable. They are becoming more and more of we are truly going to change the way we do things. You know, the model that I've used often is to buy a stereo. You know, if you used to, back in the first stereo I bought, I went to a stereo store because that's where they had people who understood stereos. So I paid additional because I bought a higher end device, but I bought it from specialists because there was no other place to do the research. Okay. Fast forward about 5-10 years, I went to a big box store. And that big box store, they had large departments who specialized in stereos. And there were magazines who had that information. So it was not as specialized, but it was still specialized. Then you went to the Walmarts. Then we went to the internet, and so on and so forth. Now, you can't even, there are no such things as stereo stores per se anymore. But the quality of the product has improved so much, and the ability for me to drive down into what specific capabilities or qualities do I want, because I can go search on YouTube. So the experience from the standpoint of the consumer is ridiculously improved, and especially the value, because I don't have to pay a company to have rent for their building. I don't have to pay a company to hire specialists. I don't have to pay a company to have demo rooms or anything along those lines, because those costs are passed on to me, being the consumer. I don't have to pay for my gas to go over there or to go to multiple stores. I just go on the internet. So if you are the consumer, it's fan-freaking-tastic. If you are the provider, it's rough. So here we are in 2023. And now all of a sudden we have people who are able to generate stuff automatically by simply telling a product, here's what I want to see. I want to see a script. I want to see a song. I want to read a book. I want a script to be written by a computer that's going to perform actions on another computer. I want to review all these things. I want to see. I want it to be more aggressive, less aggressive. I want it to be in English. I want it to be in Klingon. I want it to be whatever. And now I can make this request, and this material will be generated for me automatically. But so far, and I say so far in terms of what we're doing, what we're seeing as consumers, we're asking it to do the same thing we would be asking somebody to do for us. And this is where it's getting interesting, because we are asking for, hey, I need to write a letter. And I have a friend of mine who needed to write some letters encouraging his clients to pay up some unpaid bills, but he didn't feel he was aggressive enough. So he asked Chat GPT to be more aggressive in the letter, and he was very pleased with the result he got. He could have just as easily asked a friend who was more aggressive than him to do that, and they would have. The same thing is true when talk to somebody about coming up with a policy in terms of what's an acceptable use policy with their organization in terms of IT. Chat GPT did that. Now, they still had to double check it. They still had to read over it, make sure it made sense. But it does that version 1.0 or version 0.9. And it does that very nicely because it pulls information from all of what it can find on the internet. Oh, we also have kids who are cheating. And they're cheating because in school, they'll basically have Chat GPT that will generate that automatically. Well, and they're coming out with third-party tools that are going to protect against that as well. But again, when I was a kid, you had to pay the smart kid to do that. So it's nothing new yet. Now, when we talk about AI, when we talk about some of the expert systems, there are examples all over the place that have been going on for years, especially in terms of some of the big data analysis. One of the best examples of that is actually the SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, had a just ridiculous ton of data and nowhere near the computing power to actually look for any kind of possible intelligence signal from all the noise that's coming in from all of the radio telescopes around the world. So SETI came up with some essentially expert systems that would do the analysis and look for those patterns. And people would volunteer to actually use their computers, their home computers, which were 9 times out of 10 sitting there with unused capacity, and would actually download chunks of data and analyze it and throw the results back up. Now, is that artificial intelligence? Is it expert systems? It's very, very early it definitely is not AI in the classical sense, and it's kind of expert systems to a certain degree, but it did a ton of analysis that humans don't have the time to do. And it was ridiculously successful. It actually shut down, I think, only about a year or so ago, partially because it created such what looked like security holes by doing that sort of thing. But I participated with that for a few years or the like. But you're going to see more of this, more of the what is a creative use we can make out of AI? What is the next thing that we can do that we haven't thought of before? And the only way that's going to happen is, quite honestly, by everybody using it and by people coming up with creative things that we haven't seen before. You're already seeing a lot of expert systems. So you have people who are very good at doing things that are now delegating some of these tasks, some of the first part of the task down to Chat GPT instead of to their interns, instead of to the entry-level lawyers or the entry-level accountants. And that's going to be one of the challenges. But the big challenge, and this is the thing that I'd love to hear your feedback on, is what is it that we haven't thought of that AI can help us do better?
Are you fed up with reactive IT providers who take too long to respond, let problems fester, and nickel and dime you for every little thing? Say goodbye to those frustrations by choosing Simplex-IT, home of Amazon's best-selling author and BizTech Twist host Bob Coppedge. As Northeast Ohio's friendly neighborhood MSP, Simplex-IT has been providing top-notch managed and co-managed IT services since 2007, supporting hundreds of clients locally and across the United States. With a managed service provider like Simplex-IT, you'll benefit from proactive maintenance, 24/7 monitoring, and streamlined technology that will help you grow your business. Visit simplex-it.com for more information and to start experiencing stress-free IT today.
One of the biggest things that I always say to do when you're looking to test whether something's evolutionary or revolutionary is what is the result? The result from the consumer or the result from the provider? And always remember that at the end of the day, the goal is to do more with less. But it's up to you to define what that more is. Is it more value that you're creating? Is it a higher quality of value? Is it a lower cost? What is that more value? And for that, to a certain degree, there's industries that haven't even been invented yet. And they can be experience-based, they can be production or product-based, they can be whatever. That tools like Chat GPT, and remember, Chat GPT is just one iteration of AI that's going to be used by the general populace. Remember MySpace? Ask your parents. Do you remember CompuServe? Ask your grandparents. Remember FidoNet? Ask, just Google it. These were all ways that were originally, technologies that were originally used earlier and earlier, that were ways for us to socially interact using computers. And the first ones are not the ones we're using today. Because somebody else had a better idea. Somebody else had a different way to present value using some of the core concepts of the technology. So the really cool AI app has not been invented yet. Maybe you've got an idea. Tell me about it. So, as always, this is Bob Coppage, Crotchety Old Geek, BizTech Twists, and always you got to like the whole thing. You got to, subscribe. You have to tell your friends about this. If you don't, you're socially awkward. We know it. Take care. See you next time.